And welcome back. Joining us for a second conversation this morning is Dr. Dylan Vernon. He is here with us to discuss money in politics, breaking the regulation deadlock. For those who don't know, it's all about campaign financing and the need for reform. Good morning, Dr. Vernon.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thanks for having Belpre here today.
So we have you on the heels of the presentation that was made yesterday, the report which findings were revealed to the public. Let's begin first of all by discussing the need for such a report and of course the broader picture being the need for campaign finance reform.
Okay. Yes, thanks. The report is called Money in Belizean Politics and Breaking the Regulation Deadlock. And it's by myself, the director of Belpre, and by Devon Paulino, the policy analyst at UBS. Yesterday we launched this report at the House of Culture to a wide audience of government officials, NGO representatives, international organizations, general public. And it was the result of several months of painstaking research, looking not only at international best practice and looking at what has been proposed in Belize, but also doing a comparative analysis of what is the best practice in all Caribbean states that are independent in CARICOM and also 3 Latin American states. But why do this report? I mean, I think that's the question you're asking. You know, I recall it was 1996 when I was the director of a group called SPARE, the Society for the Promotion of Education and Research. And it was then that people had begun to, and this was under a UDP government at the time, had begun to have concerns about the amount of money in politics. The handout politics that happened was increasing at the time. That was happening on a weekly basis, where people would go to their politician for handouts, either to pay a bill for electricity, for food, and that began to increase. It was already increasing, but that began to increase since then, and now it's rampant to the point it's almost normalized. And we also saw that campaigns began to get more expensive. Around independence, campaigns cost less than $50,000 per constituency, if even that. And today, I mean, the estimates are, you can only estimate because you don't know, but political parties as parties most likely spend upwards of $5 million just by the party, and then each constituent, candidates from both parties, between $500,000 to $1 million. And when you add that all up, that's a lot of money. Yeah. And one of the things that we ask is, like, where does the money come from?
That's
for
a
all this
question.
And what impact does unregulated finance have on our society? This is basically what the report is looking at. And why after, because starting in 1998, both political parties began to promise in every manifesto that they are going to implement campaign finance regulation. And we fast forward to 2026 and there's been zero action, broken promises. And there must be a reason for that too. Right. So we asked that question in the report. But before I get to that, one of the things I want to mention, because it's important to set the stage, is that in the report we use the word political finance, not campaign finance. And that is to capture that it's not only around campaigns that politicians solicit funds or donations are made to politicians, and they have expenses all year round. Every week a politician needs to find funds for that clinic. And so before elections rolls around, money is already spending in politics. And so political finance captures in a broader way the entire electoral cycle. And we're not only talking about campaigns with the advertising that is done and with the spending that happens for the campaigns on the streets. We're talking about a 5-year cycle of money in politics. Now, the question of as to where that money comes from is key here. The only area that we regulate on paper in Belize is that of voter bribery. The Representation of the People's Act has a section that says voter bribery is illegal, vote for the candidate or the politician and the voter. If caught, there are consequences. Never been caught. No one has been caught before
Never
on either
been
side.
enforced either.
Yeah, and no one has been convicted. But outside of that, there are no regulation either on contributions or spending, and there's no public officially funds for campaigning. So the money comes from unknown, undisclosed, private sources for the most part. We find that politicians are saying that they're spending less, if any, of their own money, which used to be the case around independence time. It was self-financing, but now it's donations coming in from companies, from individuals, big ones for the most part, and also smaller ones. And also, we find, and this is one of the trends that we find most dangerous, I think, for Belize, that more and more politicians are using people's own money, public funding, public resources for giving back to people as a personal transaction.
Yeah. We could.
And that part is increasing exponentially.
But then they make it seem like they do you a favor, or are you
Yes,
supposed to
yes,
be
yes.
happy and glad that then they give you back your own money, basically?
And then it becomes not based on merit, but based upon who the politician thinks will most be influenced. And around all this, of course, people get assisted. But is it the best way? Isn't there a system already set up for that we have a government and a public service to do that kind of thing? But when the politician transacts it, as is increasingly so at the constitutional level, people are made to believe that if I not got my politician, I won't get something, and there's that personal transaction that happens, that there's a vote expected from the individual. And so once political influence gets involved for the voter, that's when we have the problem that the public resources that are supposed to be objectively and by merit distributed to those most in need, it gets all warped. So what does this all cause? And the report looks at not only the fact that we have this increase in money in politics and in also voter bribery, but it says in the absence of regulation, we have at least four main problems. One is that, and this is the biggest one, it's a driver of corruption. Money is necessary for politics. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
There are legal ways that money can be spent. Without money in politics, we wouldn't have political parties, we wouldn't have elections. I mean, there's a need for money. It's not a matter of we don't need it. It's a matter that it can be the root of all evil in politics. And when it's unregulated and there's no information, as we have grown into, then it gets dangerous. And the key one is it's a driver of corruption, as I said. We all have seen corruption, and the report tracks this increasing. And a lot of this is basically perceptions of citizens, where an increasing number of people in polls over the years are seeing corruption as one of our main challenges. And on the Transparency International Perception Index, we see that we are also not doing very well. The last one shows that we were the same level we were some 15, 20 years ago.
No
so
growth.
It's not improving. And we know the cost of corruption. I mean, I don't want to go into all the. We mentioned some of these in the report. The second thing that it causes, and it fuels, contributes to, is a deficit in or inequity in participation. Who can afford this expensive game of doing politics, having these clinics, and having this constant need to go out and get money to make all this work? The two major political parties have mastered the art of doing it, and the candidates who go into these political parties quickly learn the game, how to get money to be able to funnel this demand and to cultivate your following. And however, one of the things that happens here when the dominant parties dominate the financing is that vulnerable voices of others are ignored, and it's harder for people to get in. And we're talking here about smaller political parties. They've polled less than 2% on average since independence in the polls, and they have not been successful. Partly this is why. I mean, they can't compete with the big game, with the big guys for money.
Let me interject for a second here.
And then women, vulnerable people generally, indigenous people, rural, the people who might want to get into politics and say, that's not for me because I can't afford it, that is a huge disincentive to participation.
So, if we were to have real reform where political financing, inclusive of campaign financing, is concerned, would we be able to then level the playing field for everyone who wants to get in, either on the individual, as an independent, or as a third party, as we'd say, along with the two mass parties? Because I believe in other countries where they have certain policies and regulation, it's equal, right? You put so much in at the
it's never equal, but the attempt.
The attempt is for it to be as equal or as equitable as possible. But they're perhaps closer to it than we are.
Yes.
Because when we look at what's happening with the two major parties, PUP and UDP, the financiers look at it only as investment, right? They want to put X amount behind a candidate because when that candidate should she win, then they come back and recoup on the investment. That's how they look on that.
Yeah. The corruption dangers, in fact, realities that happen is, of course, donors require some return on investment. And that's where you see, I mean, some of the scandals that have broken out, a lot of them are directly related to politicians finding money to have these clinics. Politicians finding money. I mean, of course, we can't be naive and say that they don't keep some for themselves and their families through contracts and procurements. I just answered that where the question of your contracts they come from. But the point I think you're asking is, can we come up with something fit for purpose for Belize to regulate campaign financing? This report is saying, yes, we can. It's not only because others have done it, but the report also acknowledges that this is going to be extremely difficult. And I saw the Prime Minister being interviewed, I think earlier this year on this point, on the same couch. And he echoed what the former Prime Minister Barrow said in many interviews before the 2008 election. And it is a very realistic, some might say pessimistic view of it's very difficult to do. Do we have the capacity to enforce these regulations? Even the US can't do it. So there's an acknowledgement of the difficult side. And the report does say it's not easy to do.
It's almost like you're capitulating to the thing before you even make an attempt.
Well, that's what the report says. That because it's difficult does not mean we do not try to mitigate the worst consequences of unregulated money in politics. And we're doing it right now by strengthening procurement regulations. It's difficult to do, but we have to. It's a matter of doing it and finding the right fit. And the report has, I call it a blueprint, but it's if politicians are saying this is difficult, here is a report that breaks down international best practice, regional best practice, what Belizeans have proposed, and there have been proposals from Belizeans. We look at 6 of them, commissions, and also civil society organizations, the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Darrell Bradley in particular, those two are the most comprehensive. Look at those and analyze them, assess them, and then say, look, after looking at all this, we know this is difficult, but this is a way to do it. And we recommend clearly a process that is consultative and inclusive that would use this report and others to begin to say, okay, what of all these options that are out there can we use to begin regulating money in politics? And the options, guys, are there are 5 basic ones. Register political parties, control or limit the amount of money that donors can give, individual or companies, and at some level ask them for disclosure, that it has to be publicly disclosed, who gives what to whom, limits on spending, decrease the cost of elections so that there is not this participation deficit for the most part, and there's more transparency. And that can be done by having shorter campaigns. That can be done by limiting the use of public resources and making that harder. And then there's public financing, which some countries do well. And you were mentioning it, where some countries actually have public resources. And in the case of some, they get private donations to this public fund, and their public resources goes into it, and that fund is used to support political parties on a more equal level, including smaller parties. And then you have your reporting and your sanctions and your disclosure. So a mixture of these is what countries usually do to regulate money in politics. And so we recommend what we think would be, and it's a hybrid, a good mix for Belize. And we think that, first of all, we have to ground regulation of political parties and political finance in the Constitution as a sort of anchor and normative basis for having what we would call a standalone act for political regulation.
Here's a question, Doc. So you've gone through all the pains of researching and putting this document together, including the suggestions and recommendations that come at the end of it, that for all intents and purposes are meaningful. However, do you believe that in this particular case, the 2 mass parties are even paying attention to that with a view to actually do something on their end? Because I've always been cynical and skeptical when it comes to things of politics and party politics. Cause one a black dog and the other one a monkey, nothing really changes, right? It's my opinion. But people will look at that and say, well, good job as an academic, this was well put together, and then they just leave it on a shelf and say, well, we are continue as is, maintain the status quo.
I'm sure that a lot of that will happen, not being realistic. But I would say this. Belpre is going to be sharing this this week with the Minister of Governance, Karim Musa, later today, and then with the Prime Minister later in the week, and then with the Leader of the Opposition early next week. And basically selling it as, look, politicians have been saying for 30 years plus that they want this to happen. In fact, we have been hearing the complaint more from individual politicians that I can't take the level of demand. We need to do something about the demands we have every week. And I've heard the Prime Minister say, and other politicians, Leader of the Opposition, say that they want to see something on political finance. But it's too difficult. So here is a blueprint. Here are some ideas. Let's build around this. But yes, the 2 major political parties will be as the report said, the 2 major groups that have to be convinced that this is possible and that we can do this, and that takes some public, not only information, but some public advocacy. And in that regard, we have presented this report to the National Trade Union Congress of Belize, the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the Belize Network of NGOs.
Let's pause.
And the idea there is for these groups that have been also advocating for political finance regulation to be the ones that take up the public aspect of increasing the demand for having some sort of regulation.
Let's pause there for a second. We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with you. Guys, stay tuned.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying tuned with us. We have Dr. Vernon on the couch with us still, and he's talking about the Money in Belizean Politics report, breaking the regulation deadlock. And Doc, what I was mentioning to you during the break is that a huge part of the value of this report is what it reveals about the state of political financing and campaign financing in Belize today, as much as there is value in the recommendations and the policy that needs to be implemented based on the report. Does this report find, or did your research find, that illicit funds, illegal funds are being used to fund or finance political parties in Belize?
Well, to be very careful here, because we didn't find that illicit funds were being used. We found that people believe that illicit funds are being used.
It's a perception.
And in our review of the literature, there is a growing concern that this is happening. In fact, some politicians themselves, in the interviews that I did for my own book, were saying that this is happening. And so illicit funds are, if that is indeed growing, it's even more cause for alarm. And one of the things you can do when it comes to regulating political finance is of course to say what kind of financing you can't have at all. And illicit finance will be one of them, dark money. One of the recommendations we make is that ban foreign donations to political parties. And ban donations from companies or individuals who have contracts with government if they have donated more than X amount to a political party. So these are the kind of things that we can begin to do. Remember the Saldiva Durman scandal of the day back in 2020? You remember eventually what John Saldiva said is that he was getting campaign financing from Durman, and there's nothing illegal about that, which he's totally right about. There are no regulations. But he went on to say that it was to assist his constituents. And to me, that example is one that, if we can think of most politicians having something like that, be it national funds coming in, and helping constituents basically translates into having the need to raise money for not only your campaign, but also for the handouts that have become so normalized. And that is one of the few times we saw some evidence because of accidents, of leaking of a newspaper article. And again, there's nothing illegal about the aspect of it that money was coming in. But it is it's one small example of what happens on a bigger scale.
A microcosm.
When the government of the day initiates a program like the Starter Home Project, in your view, is that towing the line of political finance and through the use of public funds? And I say that because I hear the rationale that projects like these kind of help political parties like the People's United Party to gain more electoral confidence and perhaps even points at the polls. So is this government towing the line of using public funds to sponsor political operations when they roll out a project like that?
I think all governments over the past 4 or 5 election cycles have basically been in this gray area of using even collective public resources or goods and in this case, housing, there's land, in a way that makes it seem that there's a personal transaction. I, the minister, I am giving you a scholarship, I am giving you a land, I am giving you a house. And those words are actually used.
Yeah, of course. My minister give me that.
So exactly,
And
that's
people
what
on
is
the other end will say that too. And these are public resources being used. Now, we have become used to this as normal, as Belizeans now. But we have to ask the question, is this the way it should be? And couldn't there be, the Ministry of Housing that has a merit-based process that they use, and maybe some of that is there, but why don't we take the minister out of the equation in terms of the minister being so involved in terms of I'm providing these things, and have the minister show up when the program is being announced, that the policy is being made, but not individually.
Hand you the key and cut the ribbon and all of them.
And to everybody,
stuff.
you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, we understand politics.
I want to ask you this quickly, Doc. Is there any correlation between the Integrity Commission and the work that it does that can tie to political finance reform?
Yes, good question, because if we have what we are calling a political party and political finance regulation act, which is being proposed, it will have to be in synergy with existing anti-corruption legislation that is out there. So if there's an act that is passed, questions will have to be asked like, well, who will oversee the act? Is there a role for the Integrity Commission in this? Perhaps. One of the things that we recommend is that there is a separate act for political finance regulation and also a separate oversight mechanism. And basically we're saying that the existing electoral framework we have with the Election Boundaries Commission and the current act, the ROPA Act, that inserting political finance regulation and political party registration in there is going to be too much for this one law and this one body, that we need to separate out and have a standalone act for political finance regulation. Because some countries merge them together. We're saying, based upon our current realities, this is so big, it needs its own law, and it needs its own oversight body that is made up of social partners, independents, and not political party representatives. You can have, like the Election and Boundaries Commission, political parties dominating. In fact, they're the only ones there, and overseeing their own electoral elections.
They put the rat for man in cheese.
One final question from me. Did this study and report find that elections are being won by the wealthiest candidate versus the candidate with the best ideas, and if so, does that then
or the highest
fuel
integrity, for that
or the highest integrity, and so does that fuel perhaps the lack of a political will to enforce or to implement campaign financing? What is it finding about who wins elections? If I have the most money, do I win?
There's a small section in the report that touches on that, and it's more than just money, of course. I mean, parties do present different manifesto and ideas, but for a large extent, one of the things we say is that there's a lack of differentiation between the two major parties, and so they end up competing more on who has the better machinery to get political finance and to distribute political finance. That's the number one thing that makes them competitive. And that by itself should alarm us. When we are selecting and choosing candidates based more on their ability to raise money and to distribute money than to have good ideas for the long-term development of Belize.
That fuels the popularity contest.
And at the end of the day, I think when it comes to this question of difference between the two parties. We have political finance eventually having diminishing returns on political parties' fortunes, where because of the messiness, the corruption that happens when political finance is unregulated, a party in power will eventually have problems with scandals.
Yeah.
And the scandals are going to add up, and eventually they're going to become one of the reasons that the next party wins.
Yeah.
And then we have this cycle.
Aye, aye, aye.
And the cycle continues.
Story of our lives in the
Breaking
newsroom.
the regulation deadlock on this political finance will contribute, I think, we hope, to breaking the cycle and perhaps having parties compete more on substantive differences of issues and policies that they have for the country.
On that
That's
note,
an excellent point, Doc.
exactly. On that note, we have to end the conversation. So that's an excellent way to end the conversation. We want to thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doc. I believe the report can be accessed online at this point in time. There's a portal.
It's on the Belize Policy Research Institute website. It can be accessed. We sent a code to your
Yes.
QR code to your newsroom.
Okay.
And I can't leave without thanking the University of Belize for supporting Belpre and its office, its staff. And this report is an example, I think, of the National University of Belize working for Belize, because Belpre is part of the University of Belize.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you so much. With that, we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, it's all about the Tech Time for Read program. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.